So today we'll discuss a topic that is on decision making. And I should also emphasize that this is something that each one of us we engage in almost on a daily basis. Now, decision making in the context of leadership and management, you as a manager will be viewed somehow differently. But of course, it's something that we can learn as we go through this literature. So we can begin with the first thing first. So now decision making becomes so important, as I already, I think, pointed to, because management without decisions or managing without decisions is practically impossible. And therefore, decision making is defined as a cognitive process. Now, the word cognitive, it has to do with the thinking processes. So the word cognitive has to do with thinking processes. Therefore, decision making, repeating myself, can be regarded as the cognitive process which results in a selection of a course of action among several alternatives. So maybe just to amplify on this definition, firstly, this is a process that's occurring in our mind. Secondly, it's a process that gives us the opportunity to choose from options, okay, or several alternatives. So from this cognitive process, we'll be able to point out one thing, and that one thing that we are pointing out, it is now a decision that has been made definitely. Okay, I think that should be so clear to all of you. Then secondly, making a decision implies that there are alternative choices that you are considering. Okay, so we cannot make a decision ultimately without having options. It's like you're sitting in an exam room, then we have options A, B, C, D. And therefore, as a decider, you weigh these options. So this is what we are referring to as alternatives. Okay. So making a decision implies that there are alternative choices to be considered. In such a case, there is need not only to identify as many of these alternatives as possible, to choose the one that best fits with current goals, number one, desires, secondly, and thirdly, aspirations of an organization. So the reason why you're making this decision is because you want your hospital, it could be your ward, it could be your facility to actually go to greater heights. Therefore, these decisions that are being made, number one, they should be able to meet the goals, current goals, okay? Secondly, they should be able to meet current desires and aspirations of an organization, okay? Now, good decision-making is important at all levels of the organization. And we know that in management, we have different levels. So at all these levels of this organization or the facility, we need at all costs to actually make these decisions. Now, it begins with a recognition or awareness of problems and opportunities. So you cannot just decide from nowhere. There should be something that you are, of course, driven to. It's like a drive, okay? So these could be problems or opportunities that have presented themselves, right? So I think that is also very important for us to understand. So now, considering this important topic, we are saying this is a process. Now, since it is a process, it has several stages. The first stage is identifying and diagnosing problems. So that's the very first step in making a decision. You identify and you diagnose a problem. So that's the first step, which is very critical. Okay. And one thing that we should also remember just on this first step is that there should be differences between the actual, okay, the actual situation and the desired situation that we want to see. All right. So this, of course, now will be viewed as an opportunity or as a problem. If we forget everything, just remember that the first step is identifying and diagnosing problems. And number two, the second step is identifying objectives. All right. Now, these objectives should reflect the results that you wish to attain. So we need to identify these objectives, clear objectives. And by the way, these objectives should be SMART, S-M-A-R-T, okay? So that's an acronym. They should be specific. Apart from that one, they should be measurable, and they should be attainable, realistic, and they should be time bound. So that's the second. You need to identify objectives. Okay. Then the third step, or the third stage, is generating alternatives. Generating alternatives is the third step to making a clear decision. All right. So once an opportunity has been identified or a problem has been diagnosed correctly, and by the way, you have already put up objectives, now this stage will dictate that you generate alternatives. Alternatives are options, okay? And therefore, this step requires creativity and imagination. The reason why, even in our day-to-day lives, we have really failed to progress at times is because we don't really have alternatives. You don't have a plate where you can choose from. So the third stage is generating alternatives. Okay. Let's move on. The fourth step is evaluating alternatives. And this could be one of the most difficult stages. You now reach a stage where you are picking out what could be the best. So evaluating alternatives becomes so critical. So fundamental to this step is the ability to assess the value, okay, or relative advantages and disadvantages of each alternative. So you want now to view, want to weigh, is this the very best that I can choose? Is it, how advantageous is it to this other option? So evaluation of alternatives becomes so critical, okay? The next one is the act of choice. Critical again. This is the fifth. Now, decision-making is commonly associated with making the final choice. Of course, it may seem to be a straightforward issue, but it's something that at times will actually deter or prevent people from moving on, because the act of choice would indicate that you have chosen the best and you want now to do the choosing. So making a good decision involves carefully examining all the facts, determining whether sufficient information is available, and finally selecting the best alternative. It's not very easy. The sixth one is implementation. Okay, implementation becomes so critical. All right. So once a decision has been made, you have made a choice, you need now to implement. All right. So now, keys to effective implementation would include, number one, sensitivity to those who will be affected by the decision. At times, as a manager, you will decide that everyone should be reporting probably at 6:30. Now, you need to be very sensitive. Amongst your subordinates or people that you are actually working with, some may not just manage to come at that particular time. So you need to be very sensitive to those who will be affected by the decision. Then secondly, proper planning is also important in terms of resource allocation so that this decision can be implemented without any hindrances, all right? And the other thing that we should also ensure is the monitoring and the evaluation, which is the seventh step, all right? So no decision-making process will be complete if evaluation is not done, okay? So monitoring and evaluation is so critical. And by the way, just one thing that we should also emphasize on is that number one, this evaluation can be twofold, or it can be in two forms. Number one, there's evaluation that is known as formative evaluation, and there is also evaluation that is known as summative evaluation. So formative evaluation is that evaluation that is ongoing, meaning from the beginning of your implementation up to the end, you will be ensuring that formative evaluation takes place. Summative evaluation is summative in nature, or it is the evaluation that is done at the end of your implementation. Now, let's quickly go through the major difference between problem solving and decision making. All right. So problem solving is basically a method, while a decision-making process is actually an expanded way of doing things. Decision-making will take several stages. Problem solving will not take such a route. So I think that could be the major difference. And the other thing that we can also note is what is being projected as to what is the major difference between decision-making and problem solving. Now, at this stage, I want to add on something, okay? What are the barriers to effective decision-making? This you can make your own notes, you can jot down. What are the major barriers to decision-making? Number one, uncertainty, not being sure what will result from the decision that will be made. So number one, uncertainty. Number two, personal biases. Personal biases, okay? You amplify your desires more than the desire and the goal of the organization, all right? So personal biases, all right? Then thirdly, social realities can also be a barrier. Reality issues that you are encountering can be a barrier to effective decision-making. Then apart from that one, lack of information, which is the fourth one. Lack of information. You do not have information, you do not have adequate information, so it will be very impossible for you to make a decision that will stand for a longer time. Then the last one, it could be peer pressure. So peer pressure from colleagues, peer pressure from fellow organizations will also be a very huge barrier. Okay. Now let's move on to the last component of this presentation. And the last component of this presentation, it has to do with the types of decision making. Types of decision making. Number one type of decision making is known as programmed decision making. Programmed decision making. So this is some kind of automated way of deciding. It's like this is a routine. Of course, it does not really require a lot of thinking because it's already automated. So the first type of decision making is programmed decision. Secondly, it is also known as non-programmed, which is the opposite of the first one, non-programmed. Number three, rational decision making. Rational decision making. So this is decision making that is thought through. Okay, someone will think through it. So that is rational decision making. Now, the other one, which is the fourth type, is known as behavioral, from the word behavior. So behavioral decision making. This is decision making that is based on how I feel. At times, this may not be the best because it won't bring out the reality. So the way I feel about this issue, that's how I would decide. The other one, which is the fifth type, is known as conceptual decision making. Conceptual decision making. Now, conceptual decision making, this is decision making that is taken after critical analysis. Someone will analyze this critically using the already existing concepts for them to make a decision. The last but not the least is known as analytical decision making. Now, analytical decision making, for this one, it actually has to do with deeper thinkers, people that think deeply. They will use this analytical type of decision making. So we have come to the end of this presentation. And this is not just the end, but we'll have an opportunity to have a time to ask questions, and the platform where this will be posted will also be shared. So we'll end here, and I would like to also urge each one of us to go through this recording that will be posted soon.